She was just a healer, until ancient power exploded through her veins during a vicious rogue attack. Now she's the sacred mate, destined to strengthen whichever alpha wins her bond. Her pack performed the sacred ceremony. They chose their strongest warrior, a noble wolf who's loved her for years. But just as their souls began to connect, he arrived, the werewolf king. With a power that brings wolves to their knees, he shattered her forming bond and claimed her for himself. He says, without her, a dark curse will destroy every werewolf bloodline, but her pack calls it theft, betrayal, war. Now she's trapped between the king who stole her and the pack that raised her. Between a terrifying attraction she can't fight and a loyalty she can't abandon. When destiny is a chain and love becomes a battlefield, will her choice save their world or destroy everything she's ever loved? The healer's hands moved with practiced precision, her fingers gently probing the wounds of the injured, wolves who had returned from the skirmish. Moonlight spilled through the pack's medical lodge windows, casting a silvery glow across her workspace. Each touch seemed to pulse with an unusual energy, wounds closing faster than traditional healing methods would allow. "You're doing that thing again," a familiar voice teased from the doorway. Maya, the pack beta's daughter, leaned against the wooden frame, her eyes sparkling with amusement. The healer, whose name was Arya, glanced up, a slight flush coloring her cheeks. "What thing?" she asked, though she knew exactly what Maya meant. "That healing. It's different when the moonlight hits you," Maya said, stepping closer. She watched as another wolf's wound knitted together seamlessly under Arya's touch. "The elders are noticing too. Have you seen how they look at you during council meetings?" Arya brushed off the comment, her attention focused on mixing herbs for a new healing salve. Glass jars clinked softly as she arranged. Various dried plants and roots. The scent of lavender and sage filled the air, mingling with the metallic undertone of blood from the wounded wolves. "The Moon Festival is coming," Maya continued, her tone sing-song. "I bet at least 3 unmated males are going to try and court you this year. That tracker from the northern pack, what was his name? Rowan? He's been watching you." "I'm not interested," Arya responded quickly, her hands moving with practiced efficiency as she ground herbs into a fine paste. "My work is more important than finding a mate." Maya rolled her eyes. "You can't avoid the tradition forever. Every wolf needs a mate eventually." The pack's medical lodge was warm and cluttered, filled with hanging bundles of dried herbs, shelves of carefully labeled tinctures, and the soft groans of recovering wolves. Arya worked methodically, her movements both gentle and precise. Each wolf she touched seemed to heal faster than normal, though she tried not to draw attention to the unusual speed of her healing. As the evening wore on, the wounded wolves were bandaged and resting. Moonlight continued to stream through the windows, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. The pack elders had been watching her more closely lately, their knowing glances making Arya uncomfortable. Maya helped clean up the medical supplies, chattering about the upcoming festival and the potential suitors. Arya listened with half an ear, her mind partially elsewhere. Something felt different tonight, a strange energy that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. When she finally retired to her small quarters within the pack's living area, the moonlight seemed to follow her. Her dreams that night were unusual, fragmented images of silver eyes that seemed to pierce through her very soul, a sense of an ancient power stirring deep within her blood. The moonbeams pooled around her sleeping form, casting an ethereal glow that seemed to pulse with its own strange rhythm. The sacred grove rustled with anticipation as pack members prepared for the annual moon festival. Arya's hands moved carefully, weaving silvery ribbons through ancient oak branches and hanging delicate moon-shaped lanterns that would illuminate the gathering space as darkness fell. Around her, whispers rippled through the pack like wind through leaves. The choosing ceremony, one elder murmured to another. 50 years since we've seen it performed. Maya appeared beside Arya, helping her hang the final decorations. Can you believe how excited everyone is? She asked, her fingers deftly tying a ribbon. Arya smiled, but something felt different today. The air seemed charged with an electric tension, like the moment before a summer storm. Her wolf senses prickled with an unexplained unease. The afternoon feast was a spectacular display of pack unity. Long tables groaned under the weight of roasted meats, fresh fruits, and traditional dishes passed down through generations. Wolves from different families and ranks mingled, their excitement for the evening's ceremonies building with each passing moment. No one noticed the first signs of trouble until the screams began. The attack was coordinated with brutal precision. Rogues burst from 3 separate directions: the eastern forest, the western ridge, and the northern valley. Their attack was so synchronized it seemed almost military in its execution. Pack warriors responded instantly, the air filled with snarls, the sound of shifting bones, and the metallic scent of blood. Arya watched in horror as wolves she had treated, wolves she had healed, now fought for their very survival. The pack's beta, Maya's father, was in the thick of the battle. Arya saw him take down 3 rogues in quick succession, his wolf form massive and powerful. But then she saw something that made her blood run cold. A rogue with a silver-tipped dagger struck from behind. The wound was instantly recognizable to a healer. Silver poison, the most deadly weapon against werewolves. The beta collapsed, his powerful form trembling as the silver worked its deadly magic. Time seemed to slow. Arya felt something inside her shift. The moonlight, though it was still afternoon, seemed to concentrate around her hands. Her skin began to tingle, an ancient power rising from deep within her bones. Without thinking, she ran to the beta's side. Her hands began to glow with an impossible light, pure and silver and burning with an energy no one had ever seen before. The pack watched in stunned silence as Arya channeled the moonlight directly into the beta's wound. Her hands moved with a precision beyond medical training, beyond anything anyone had ever witnessed. The silver poison began to retreat, pushed back by the pure light emanating from her palms. For a moment, ancient markings flickered across her skin, intricate symbols that spoke of power far older than the current pack, far more mysterious than any known werewolf magic. The beta gasped. The silver poison disappeared, and Arya collapsed. The pack elders exchanged a look of profound shock and recognition. Whispers began to spread. The sacred mate, one elder murmured. She has finally revealed herself. Soft white light filtered through thin cotton curtains, casting a gentle glow across the infirmary's sterile room. Arya's eyes fluttered open, her body feeling heavy, weighted with an exhaustion that seemed to reach deep into her bones. The sharp antiseptic smell of the medical ward mixed with the familiar scent of herbs and healing salves. Before she could fully orient herself, she realized the room was not empty. The entire pack council sat in a semicircle around her bed. 7 elders, their faces etched with a combination of reverence and anticipation. Elder Marcus, the oldest and most respected council member, sat directly in front of her. His silver hair gleamed like moonlight, and his eyes held a depth of knowledge that seemed to span centuries. "Welcome back, sacred mate," Elder Marcus said, his voice soft yet commanding. Arya struggled to sit up, her muscles protesting. "I don't understand," she whispered. The elder leaned forward, his weathered hands clasped together. "Your bloodline is ancient, more powerful than any in recent pack history. The sacred mate is not just a healer, but a conduit of pack strength. Your bond will not just be a personal choice, but a critical decision that could transform our entire pack's future." Around her, the other council members nodded. Their gazes felt heavy, almost oppressive. Arya felt a surge of panic rising in her chest. This was more than a personal moment. This was about pack survival, about a destiny she never knew existed. The choosing ceremony is a sacred ritual, another elder explained. Candidates will demonstrate their worth, not just through physical strength, but through loyalty, character, and potential to lead. As if on cue, the door opened. The warrior, the one who had been her childhood friend, her protector, stepped into the room. His presence was commanding, yet there was a gentleness in his eyes when they met hers. "I volunteer to be considered," he said quietly. Several other males also stepped forward, strong warriors, respected pack members, each hoping to be chosen as her mate. But something in the warrior's stance was different. There was a vulnerability beneath his strength, a sincerity that made the other candidates seem almost performative. Arya's heart raced. She had known this warrior her entire life. They had trained together, healed together, protected each other through countless challenges. And now, something fundamental was shifting between them. The elders began discussing the logistics of the choosing ceremony. 3 days until the full moon. Ritual preparations, testing of candidates. But Arya could barely hear them. Her eyes were locked with the warriors, a conversation happening without words. When the others filed out, he remained. He approached her bed, sitting carefully on the edge, maintaining a respectful distance. "I know this is overwhelming," he said softly, "but I want you to know something." His hand moved, almost touching hers, but not quite. A gesture of restraint, of deep respect. "I have loved you," he confessed, "not as a potential mate for the pack, but as you. Just you. Long before anyone knew about your sacred lineage." The vulnerability in his voice made Arya's breath catch. This was not a declaration of pack duty, but of genuine emotion. The night of the choosing ceremony descended with an ethereal grace, moonlight pooling like liquid silver across the sacred grove. Ancient trees stood as silent witnesses, their branches creating a natural cathedral for the most important ritual in pack history. Wolves from every corner of the territory gathered, their anticipation electric and heavy with centuries of tradition. Arya stood at the center of the clearing, her white ceremonial dress shimmering under the full moon's intense glow. The fabric seemed to capture and reflect moonlight, making her appear almost luminescent. Around her, the pack elders formed a sacred circle, their chants low and rhythmic, words older than memory, spoken in the ancient wolf tongue that vibrated with power. The warrior approached, his movements deliberate and reverent. Unlike the other candidates who had strutted and postured during the earlier trials, he moved with a quiet confidence that spoke of deep understanding. His eyes never left Arya, a connection that seemed to transcend the ceremonial moment. Elder Marcus raised his hands, silencing the soft murmurs of the gathered pack. "We have witnessed the trials," he proclaimed. "We have seen strength. We have measured loyalty. But one stands above all others." The warrior knelt before Arya, not in submission, but in profound respect. The pack watched in breathless silence as Elder Marcus continued the ancient ritual, reciting words that had bound mates for generations. When the elder announced the warrior's selection, the grove erupted in howls of approval. It was unanimous. He would be her chosen mate, the one to strengthen the pack through their bond. As the warrior took Arya's hands, a subtle energy began to pulse between them. The first delicate threads of the mate bond started to form, a connection both magical and deeply personal. Arya felt warmth spreading through her body, a sense of completeness she had never experienced before. But before the bond could fully solidify, something changed. The temperature in the grove plummeted instantly. Moonlight seemed to fracture and bend, creating unnatural shadows that writhed and twisted. A presence so powerful it was almost suffocating filled the sacred space. From the darkness emerged the werewolf king. His royal guard flanked him, their armor gleaming with ancient silver emblems. But it was the king himself who commanded absolute attention. Tall, impossibly regal, with eyes that burned like molten silver, he moved with a predatory grace that silenced every wolf present. The warrior remained protectively close to Arya, but even he seemed diminished in the king's overwhelming presence. By the crown's right, the king's voice rang out cold and absolute, "I claim my sacred mate." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Arya felt the fragile mate bond between her and the warrior suddenly splinter. A sensation so painful it was like having her very soul torn apart. She gasped, dropping to her knees as agony ripped through her. The sacred grove, moments ago filled with celebration, now stood frozen in shock and terror. The werewolf king's silver eyes locked onto Arya, holding a promise and a threat that would change everything. The sacred grove erupted into chaos. Wolves snarled and growled, their collective outrage rising like a thundercloud. Elders shouted protests, and younger pack members trembled beneath the king's overwhelming presence. But the royal guard moved with surgical precision, their silver-tipped spears creating an impenetrable barrier that instantly silenced any physical resistance. The werewolf king moved forward with a predatory grace that defied human movement. Each step seemed calculated, deliberate, a panther stalking its prey. His silver eyes never left Arya, tracking her every breath, every subtle shift of her body. "I felt her awakening," he spoke, his voice a low resonance that seemed to vibrate through every living creature in the grove. "Hundreds of miles away, I sensed her power surge. The moonlight healing, the ancient markings. She is no ordinary healer. She is the sacred mate my bloodline has waited generations to claim." The warrior stepped forward, his muscles coiled with tension. Despite facing a power far beyond his own, he refused to submit. "She has already been chosen," he growled, his challenge clear and unwavering. "By pack law and tradition, she belongs to our pack." A ripple of cold energy exploded from the king. Without even raising a hand, his alpha power crushed the surrounding wolves. Lesser wolves immediately dropped to their knees, whimpering and exposing their throats in submission. The warrior staggered but somehow remained standing, a testament to his inner strength. The king barely acknowledged the warrior's defiance. He extended one hand toward Arya, his movement elegant yet absolutely commanding. "Come," he said simply. Arya found herself frozen, caught between terror and an inexplicable magnetic pull. Her wolf side whimpered internally, simultaneously repulsed and drawn to the king's overwhelming presence. Something ancient and primal recognized the power radiating from him, a connection that transcended her current understanding. When she hesitated, the king's expression darkened. "You have no true choice," he explained, his tone clinical and precise. "Without our powers joined, a curse will consume all werewolf bloodlines within a single year. Every pack, every lineage, extinct. My bloodline has foreseen this. Only the sacred mate's power can prevent total destruction." The weight of his words crashed through the grove. Wolves exchanged terrified glances. The elders looked pale, understanding the implications far more deeply than the younger pack members. The warrior stepped forward again, desperation and rage mixing in his voice. "She is not some political asset to be traded. She has a choice." The king's laugh was sharp and cold. "Choice is an illusion," he responded. "Destiny has already been written." He turned back to Arya, his silver eyes softening marginally. "I will grant you until dawn to say your goodbyes. Then you will accompany me to the royal court and fulfill your true purpose." The proclamation hung in the air like a sentence of exile. Arya remained motionless, her mind reeling from the sudden transformation of her entire existence. The warrior's desperate gaze met hers, a mixture of protection, love, and profound loss. The king's royal guard began forming a protective perimeter, their movements synchronized and precise. Dawn was coming, and with it, a journey that would change everything. The pre-dawn light cast long shadows across the pack's sacred grounds. Arya stood surrounded by her pack, her closest friend clinging to her with silent tears, while the warrior watched from a short distance, his eyes promising something more than farewell. The royal entourage waited with military precision. Massive black horses stamped impatiently, their breath forming misty clouds in the cold morning air. Armored wolves wearing the king's silver and midnight blue colors created a human, no wolf, barrier around their monarch. 3 days, her friend whispered, squeezing Arya's hands. Just 3 days. We'll find a way. Arya's heart felt heavy. Her healing abilities had always been about connection and nurturing, and now she was being torn away from everything familiar. The king stood nearby, distant and imposing, his silver eyes scanning the horizon with an almost restless intensity. When the order to depart came, it was crisp and immediate. No discussion, no negotiation. The king mounted his stallion with fluid grace, then gestured for Arya to be assisted into one of the covered wagons designated for travelers of importance. The warrior stepped forward, his muscles tense. For a moment it seemed he might challenge the king's authority again, but wisdom, or perhaps strategic caution, held him back. His gaze locked with Arya's, a silent promise burning between them. The journey was methodical and grueling. Arya discovered quickly that the king maintained a deliberate distance, speaking only when absolutely necessary about travel logistics or route considerations. Yet she noticed, in stolen glances and moments of unexpected proximity, that his silver eyes followed her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. They traveled through dense forests and mountain passes, the landscape shifting from her familiar pack territory to wilder, more remote regions. Royal guards rode in tight formations, their movements synchronized like a living, breathing mechanism of protection and strategy. On the second day, they stopped at a remote royal outpost nestled in a mountain valley. Several soldiers lay wounded from a recent skirmish with rogues, silver-inflicted injuries that traditional healers struggled to treat. Without hesitation, Arya moved among the injured. Her hands glowed softly with moonlight-infused energy, her touch gentle yet powerful. The soldiers watched in awe as wounds closed, infections retreated, and strength returned to bodies that moments before had seemed broken. The king observed her silently, something unreadable flickering in his expression. When she finished treating the last soldier, he approached, closer than he had been during their entire journey. "Your abilities have grown," he remarked, not a question, but an observation. Arya wiped her brow, exhausted but satisfied. "Healing is about understanding pain," she responded carefully. "Not just physical wounds, but the connections between living beings." That night, after the camp settled, the king entered her tent. Gone was the distant, authoritative monarch. Instead, he looked almost vulnerable, a man carrying a burden too heavy for any single person. "The curse," he began, "is not a simple magical attack. It's a targeted destruction of mate bonds in alpha bloodlines." His explanation would reveal the depth of an ancient conflict, the desperate stakes that drove him to claim her, and the complex magical threat that endangered every werewolf pack across their territories. The royal fortress rose like a stone giant against the misty mountain landscape, its gray stone walls etched with ancient protective runes that seemed to shimmer with wolf magic. Arya stepped from the royal carriage, her simple traveling clothes a stark contrast to the opulent surroundings. Courtiers lined the grand entrance, their eyes a mixture of curiosity and barely concealed judgment. Whispers followed her like a trailing wind. "The stolen mate," they murmured, "claimed by the king against her will." Her chambers were breathtaking. Silk tapestries depicting werewolf histories adorned the walls, A massive four-poster bed dominated the room, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked carefully manicured gardens. Yet for all its luxury, Arya felt trapped. Golden bars were still bars, no matter how beautifully they were crafted. An elderly wolf arrived the next morning. His silver hair was pulled back in a traditional braid, and intricate tattoos, marks of sacred wolf lineage, wound down his weathered arms. Introducing himself as Elder Kairos, he was to be her mentor in understanding and controlling her expanding powers. "You are more than a healer. Now," he explained, his voice rough but kind. "You are a vessel of ancient magic that few understand." Their first training session began at moonrise. In a secluded meditation chamber lined with moonstones, Elder Kairos instructed her to center herself. "Feel the lunar energy," he guided. "Let it flow through you, not control you." Arya closed her eyes. Moonlight seemed to pool around her hands, creating soft, silver tendrils of energy that danced and flickered. But control remained elusive. The power surged unexpectedly, moonlight erupting from her palms in wild, unpredictable patterns. Vases shattered, tapestries rippled as if caught in an invisible wind. Elder Cairo stepped back, watching with a mixture of concern and fascination. "Breathe," he commanded. But the energy was beyond her control. The chamber doors burst open. The king entered, his mere presence seeming to stabilize the chaotic magical environment. Without thinking, he approached Arya, his hand reaching for hers. The moment their skin touched, something electric happened. A surge of profound connection, raw, powerful, unexpected, passed between them. Their mate bond, dormant but powerful, tried to spark into full existence. They sprang apart, both visibly shaken. The king's composure cracked for just a moment. "My parents," he said quietly, unexpectedly vulnerable, "died from the curse's effects. I was 16 when I became ruler, alone and desperate to protect our people." Elder Kairos watched their interaction with knowing eyes, the weight of generations of wolf magic hanging in the air between them. Arya realized then that the king was more than just a monarch. He was a survivor, carrying wounds deeper than she had initially understood. The royal library's restricted section was a labyrinth of ancient knowledge, its shelves lined with leather-bound tomes that whispered secrets of werewolf history. Arya moved carefully between the stacks, her fingers trailing along spines marked with intricate wolf clan symbols. 2 weeks of intense training with Elder Kairos had refined her magical control, but her curiosity burned brighter than ever. Moonlight filtered through stained glass windows, casting ethereal patterns across dusty manuscripts. She pulled a particularly old text from a high shelf, careful not to disturb the delicate parchment. The document was written in an archaic wolf dialect, its pages brittle and yellowed with age. As she translated, a chilling narrative emerged. Centuries ago, the werewolf royal line had committed a profound betrayal against the sacred pack territories. A previous king had broken an ancient blood oath, using dark magic to manipulate pack boundaries and consolidate power. The response was swift and brutal, a curse designed to attack the very foundation of werewolf mate bonds, targeting royal bloodlines with a slow, devastating magic that would gradually weaken their supernatural connections. Arya's fingers traced the intricate diagrams showing how the curse worked. It wasn't just a simple spell, but a complex magical mechanism that attacked the deepest spiritual connections between mates, creating mistrust, weakening pack bonds, and ultimately threatening the entire werewolf species' survival. She was so absorbed in her research that she didn't hear the library doors open. The king's presence filled the room before she saw him, a tangible energy that made her wolf instincts prickle with awareness. "You're not supposed to be in the restricted section," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through her bones. Arya lifted her chin, refusing to show weakness. "I'm researching the curse. These texts explain more than anyone has told me. To her surprise, he didn't reprimand her. Instead, he approached, his movements precise and controlled. He leaned over the manuscript, his body close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. "This section is dangerous," he murmured, but his eyes were fixed on the ancient text. "These records are volatile." Together, they began decoding the complex magical language, their heads bent close, hands occasionally brushing as they turned fragile pages. The intimacy was unexpected, a shared purpose that dissolved the tension that had existed between them. Hours passed, candles burned low, moonlight shifted across the library floor. Exhaustion crept into Arya's muscles. Her translation became slower, her movements more labored. When she swayed slightly, the king's strong hands caught her immediately, preventing her from falling. They were suddenly very close. His silver eyes locked with hers, intense and consuming. For a breathless moment, their faces were mere inches apart. Something electric and powerful hummed between them, the nascent mate bond pushing against the careful boundaries they'd maintained. Their lips were so close that she could feel his breath. The heart chamber was a sacred space unlike any other in the royal fortress. Carved from solid obsidian and illuminated by moonstone crystals, the circular room seemed to breathe with ancient magical energy. The walls were etched with intricate runes that pulsed with a soft silver light, creating an atmosphere of both power and profound mysticism. The king stood at the chamber's center, his posture rigid but his eyes betraying a vulnerability Arya had never seen before. "This ritual," he explained, his voice steady but low, "requires complete synchronization. Our minds must become one to trace the curse's magical roots." Arya nodded, understanding the gravity of what they were about to attempt. The heart chamber was not just a room, but a magical conduit, a place where werewolf magic could be channeled at its most pure and potent form. "We must touch," he said, extending his hands. "Skin contact will allow the deepest possible mental connection." When their hands touched, the chamber's runes flared bright. Immediately, Arya felt herself being pulled into a whirlwind of memories, not just her own, but the king's. She saw his childhood, a young boy, barely 10, watching his parents die from the curse's mysterious effects. The weight of the crown placed on his head too soon, too suddenly. Lonely nights in massive halls, surrounded by advisors but utterly alone. The constant pressure of protecting an entire species while feeling fundamentally isolated. Simultaneously, he was experiencing her memories, her dedication to healing, the quiet moments of practicing her craft, her deep love for her pack, her compassion that saw beyond surface appearances. Their magical energies began to intertwine, a brilliant dance of silver and deep blue light that wound around them like living threads. The curse's dark tendrils, visible now as shadowy, poisonous strands, began to react, trying to resist their combined power. The king's grip on her hands tightened. "We're making progress," he whispered, though his voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Arya could feel the curse's core, a malevolent, ancient magic designed to slowly erode werewolf bloodlines. It was intelligent, adaptive, constantly shifting to protect itself. But their merged consciousness was finding its weak points, tracing its magical signatures. Sweat beaded on both their foreheads. The ritual was physically and emotionally demanding, forcing them to be completely transparent with each other. Every fear, every hope, every private thought was laid bare. When the ritual concluded, they separated, breathing heavily. The chamber's runes slowly dimmed, returning to their dormant state. They were exhausted but exhilarated. For the first time, they truly saw each other, not as king and potential mate, but as complex, feeling individuals. That night, he came to her chambers. "You're the first person," he said softly, who has seen me as more than the crown. And then, gentle and full of promise, they shared their first real kiss. The week following, their intimate connection unfolded like a delicate dance. Arya discovered nuances of the royal court she hadn't expected. The king, whose name she was learning was Kai, moved through complex political landscapes with a grace that surprised her. During shared meals in the private dining hall, she watched how he listened to advisors, how he balanced decisive leadership with genuine compassion. Midnight research sessions became their sacred ritual. They would sit surrounded by ancient texts, shoulders nearly touching, decoding fragments of werewolf history. Kai's fingers would trace ancient runes, explaining their meanings with a scholar's precision and a leader's depth of understanding. Arya found herself captivated not just by his physical presence, but by the complexity of his mind. One evening, as moonlight spilled through stained glass windows, Kai shared stories of his pack's history. His fingers absently traced the rim of a silver goblet, his eyes distant. "We're not just rulers," he explained softly. "We're guardians of a delicate magical ecosystem." Arya noticed how the courtiers watched them. Where initial whispers had been suspicious, now there was a growing sense of hope. Her healing abilities were becoming legendary. She had already saved 3 critically injured royal guards, her moonlight-enhanced powers growing stronger each day. The mate bond between them was no longer forced, but evolving naturally. Soft touches, shared glances, moments of understanding that transcended words. Her wolf responded to his presence with a growing sense of comfort rather than resistance. During a strategy meeting, she watched him navigate complex diplomatic tensions with remarkable skill. When a Northern Territory representative challenged a trade agreement, Kai listened carefully, then proposed a compromise that left everyone satisfied. Arya realized leadership was less about dominance and more about understanding. Their connection deepened through these shared moments, small intimacies, a hand briefly touching during a map review, shared cups of herbal tea in the early morning, quiet conversations that revealed layers of vulnerability. Just as she was beginning to feel truly integrated into this new world, everything shattered. The messenger arrived during an afternoon council session. His clothes were travel-worn, his face etched with urgent desperation. When he approached the throne and whispered to Kai, she saw the king's expression transform, from calm leadership to something cold and predatory. Kai's silver eyes met hers across the room. The temperature seemed to drop. "Your pack," he said, his voice controlled but dangerous, "has allied with the rogues. They're planning an attack during the lunar eclipse." The words hit her like physical blows. Her pack, her home, and leading them, the warrior who had loved her, who had been prepared to fight for her at the choosing ceremony. They were coming to rescue her, not understanding that she was no longer a prisoner, but choosing her path. The council erupted into chaos. Advisors spoke of fortifications, battle strategies, potential counterattacks. But Arya could only hear the thundering of her own heart, her beloved pack, her friend, the warrior who had watched over her for years. They were coming to assault the very place that was becoming her home. And they would do so during the lunar eclipse, the one time werewolf powers were most vulnerable. The most strategic and dangerous moment for an attack. Kai was already issuing orders. Royal guards would be positioned. Magical wards would be reinforced. The fortress would become an impenetrable fortress. But for Arya, this was more than a military strategy. This was a potential destruction of everything she had ever known. Her family, her history, her entire past was about to clash violently with her emerging future, and she would be forced to choose. The tension in the royal fortress grew thick as smoke, filling every corridor and chamber with an electric anticipation of conflict. Arya paced the intricate marble floors of her private quarters, her wolf's restlessness matching her human anxiety. 3 days stretched before them like an endless nightmare. 3 days until the lunar eclipse would render all werewolves vulnerable. She sought out Kai immediately, finding him in the war room surrounded by tactical maps and hushed conversations that stopped abruptly when she entered. The king's advisors exchanged guarded looks, but he dismissed them with a single authoritative gesture. "I need to go back," Arya said without preamble. "I can talk to them. I can make them understand." Kai's silver eyes hardened. "Absolutely not." His voice left no room for argument. "Scouts report the rebel force is less than a day's hard ride from our borders. They're traveling with rogues, unpredictable and violent." Her hands clenched. "They're my pack, my people. They don't understand what's happening. They think you've stolen me, that I'm being held against my will. And you're not?" The challenge hung between them, sharp as a blade. Arya hesitated. The fortress had become more than a prison. Her training with the sacred mentor, her discoveries in the royal library, her growing connection with Kai. These weren't chains, but choices. "I need to try," she pressed. "If I don't, blood will be shed. My blood, their blood." Kai's response was immediate and absolute. "No." The court began to fracture. Whispers spread like wildfire. Some nobles supported the king's decision, arguing that the sacred mate's safety was paramount. Others, particularly those from traditional pack territories, murmured about overreach, about the ancient rights of pack bonds. Arya watched the division grow. During council meetings, she saw the subtle arguments, the fractured alliances. Her presence had become a political powder keg. Desperate, she turned to the network of merchants who traveled between territories. Carefully worded messages, sealed with her pack's traditional wax mark, were prepared. Merchants who owed her pack favors were enlisted, promised significant rewards for delivering her explanation. Each message returned unopened. Her mentor, the elderly sacred wolf who had been training her, watched her growing desperation with knowing eyes. "They have already judged you," he said quietly during a meditation session. "In their eyes, you've chosen the crown over your pack." The words struck deeper than any physical wound. Kai increased the fortress defenses. Magical wards were reinforced. Royal guards doubled their patrols. Every entrance was prepared for potential assault. The heart chamber, the magical core of werewolf power within the fortress, became a central point of preparation. Arya retreated to this sacred space. Ancient texts surrounded her. Scrolls dating back centuries were carefully unrolled, their fragile parchment whispering secrets of pack conflicts, magical bonds, and ancient truths. She searched. Not for a weapon, not for a defensive strategy, but for understanding, for a solution that wouldn't require bloodshed. The heart chamber pulsed with moonlight even though it was deep within the stone fortress. Her emerging powers seemed to resonate with the ancient magic of the place. Fragments of history danced around her, glimpses of past conflicts, of mate bonds broken and reformed, of pack loyalties tested. Somewhere in these texts was an answer. She was certain of it. The eclipse approached. Relentless. Inevitable. The night air crackled with tension, moonlight casting sharp shadows across the fortress walls. Just after midnight, the first whispers of intrusion reached the royal guards. Arya's wolf senses prickled. She knew those movement patterns. These weren't random attackers. These were her pack's scouts. During the emergency war council the next morning, royal generals spread tactical maps across the massive oak table. Their fingers traced potential invasion routes, marked with red pins and aggressive strategic notations. "They'll approach from the western ridge," declared General Marcus, a scarred veteran with steel in his eyes. "We'll create a defensive line here, and—" "No," Arya interrupted, her voice cutting through the military discussion. All heads turned toward her. Those aren't random attack patterns. That's how my pack hunts. They're probing our defenses, testing our response. The generals exchanged skeptical glances. Kai remained silent, watching her intently. With all due respect, General Marcus said coolly, "These are rebel forces. Your personal insights are irrelevant." Arya's frustration burned. Fighting them will only strengthen the curse. Every drop of werewolf blood spilled feeds the ancient magic that's destroying our mate bonds. Can't you see that? The room went silent. The royal strategists looked at her as though she'd spoken a foreign language. Kai's expression remained unreadable, but she caught a flicker of something, respect perhaps, in his eyes. "The military will handle this," Marcus stated firmly. "The king's protection is paramount." That evening, the fortress hummed with prepared tension. Soldiers checked weapons, magical wards were reinforced, and every entrance was carefully guarded. Arya felt the weight of potential violence pressing against her skin. When Kai entered her chambers that night, the atmosphere transformed. Gone was the political strategist, the distant king. Here was a man, a wolf, facing potential destruction. Their first kiss was desperate, hungry. Years of tension, of unspoken desire, of complex emotions erupted between them. His hands moved with reverent intensity, tracing her body as though memorizing every curve, every line. They made love with the knowledge that dawn might bring destruction. Their mate bond, dormant for so long, blazed to brilliant, overwhelming life. Waves of connection crashed between them. Arya could feel every emotion within Kai, his fear, his passion, his determination to protect. Her own feelings merged with his, creating a symphony of shared vulnerability. Moonlight spilled across their tangled bodies, sweat glistened on skin. Their breathing synchronized, heartbeats creating a primal rhythm. In the quiet aftermath, when their bodies were still intertwined, Arya turned to face him. Her hand traced the strong line of his jaw. "Promise me," she whispered. "If it's possible, spare my pack members." Kai's silver eyes met hers, a complex mix of emotions, love, strategy, harsh political necessity, flickered across his expression. "I promise," he said softly, though they both understood the fragility of such a promise. Outside their chambers, the fortress waited. The eclipse approached, and war was about to break. The eclipse descended like a shroud of darkness, consuming the sky in a menacing gray that seemed to swallow all light. Arya stood in the tower, her hands gripping the stone windowsill so tightly her knuckles turned white. Below, the courtyard transformed into a churning nightmare of violence. Werewolves from her home pack, men and women she had grown up with, healed, loved, crashed against the royal guards in a brutal dance of tooth and claw. The eclipse's power warped everything. Mate bonds that should have connected wolves now sparked and fractured, creating chaos where loyalty once stood firm. She watched in horror as pack members who had been lifelong friends now turned on each other, their eyes glazed and wild. The curse's influence was unmistakable. Wolves would charge forward, recognize a packmate, and then inexplicably attack with savage intensity. In the courtyard, her childhood friend Marcus, who she had treated for wounds countless times, now fought alongside her former beta's daughter against royal guards. Their movements were synchronized, but something was terribly wrong. Their eyes were blank, their attacks mechanical and ruthless. The warrior who had loved her, who had been chosen as her first potential mate, led the assault. His movements were calculated, each strike precise and deadly. He moved through the royal defenses like a phantom, leaving wounded guards in his wake. Arya's wolf stirred inside her, torn between loyalty to her pack and the bond she now shared with Kai. The eclipse's power pulled at her, making her head spin with conflicting emotions and magical interference. "Stop!" she screamed, though her voice was lost in the cacophony of battle. Royal mages attempted to cast protective wards, but the eclipse's power diminished their magic. Silver blades flashed, wolfsbane-infused weapons cutting through supernatural defenses. The courtyard became a landscape of controlled chaos, each movement calculated yet unpredictable. The warrior breached the inner defenses with shocking speed. Royal guards attempted to block his path, but he moved like liquid shadow, dispatching them with brutal efficiency. His target was clear: the throne room where Kai awaited. Inside the throne room, Kai stood prepared. His royal armor gleamed, enchantments woven into each piece to protect against supernatural attacks. When the warrior burst through the massive oak doors, the room seemed to compress with tension. "You stole her!" the warrior snarled, his wolf form flickering just beneath his human skin. "The sacred mate belongs with her people, not trapped by a tyrant's political games." Kai remained calm, a predatory stillness radiating from him. She chose her path. Her power is crucial to saving all werewolf bloodlines. Arya was held back by royal guards, their grip firm but not cruel. She watched in agonized silence, knowing that everything she loved was about to collide in this moment. The warrior attacked first, a blur of muscle and supernatural speed. Kai met him move for move, their combat a brutal dance of alpha dominance. Each strike carried the weight of pack honor, of love, of desperate survival. Silver flashed. Claws extended. The room became a hurricane of supernatural combat, magical energy crackling between them with each devastating blow. The warrior was fueled by righteous anger, by a love that had been denied. Kai fought with the calculated precision of a leader who understood the larger consequences of this battle. Their fight was more than personal. It was a conflict that would determine the fate of werewolf society, of the ancient bonds that held their world together. Kai gained the upper hand, his experience and royal training evident in each calculated movement. But when he saw Arya's anguished expression, when he recognized the pain in her eyes, he hesitated. That moment of vulnerability was all the warrior needed. A silver blade emerged, catching the dim eclipse light. And in one devastating strike, he wounded Kai deeply. Blood spilled across the marble floor, the sound of metal and flesh creating a horrific symphony of violence. The moment the silver blade struck Kai, everything changed. Arya's scream ripped through the throne room, a sound more wolf than human, more power than voice. Her body moved without conscious thought, breaking free from the royal guard's grasp with a surge of energy that sent them crashing against stone walls. She positioned herself between the wounded warriors, her body a living barrier. Kai was bleeding profusely, the silver blade having struck deep into his side. The warrior who had led the attack stood panting, his own wounds from their brutal combat glistening with supernatural healing already beginning. But something else was happening. Something terrifying. Dark, ink-like tendrils began materializing in the air around them. The curse, which had been a theoretical threat until now, became horrifyingly visible. These shadowy appendages seemed to pulse and breathe, feeding on the violence and blood spilled in the room. With each drop of alpha blood, the tendrils grew thicker, more substantial. Arya could see them now, not just imagine or sense them, but actually see how they wove between wolves, how they consumed emotional pain, how they transformed conflict into raw, destructive energy. The curse wasn't just a magical phenomenon, it was a living entity that thrived on division. Her heightened healing senses perceived something profound in that moment. The curse fed on the fundamental fractures between werewolf factions, between royal bloodlines and independent packs, between tradition and rebellion. Every moment of hatred, every drop of blood shed between wolves who should have been united, made the curse stronger. The tendrils began wrapping around the warriors, around the guards, around her. They were dark, almost liquid, but with an intelligence that felt ancient and malevolent. They whispered of old betrayals, of centuries of mistrust between pack and crown. Arya understood then. The curse wasn't just attacking mate bonds, it was systematically destroying werewolf society by turning wolves against each other. And it was winning. Her wolf rose within her, merging with her human consciousness in a way she'd never experienced before. The protective instinct was overwhelming. These were her people, her pack, her king, her would-be mate, and they were being destroyed by an ancient malevolence. In that moment of desperate clarity, she realized the only way to break the curse required an impossible sacrifice. She would need to sever both mate bonds, the one partially formed with the warrior and the deeper, more intense bond with Kai. By releasing that concentrated magical energy, she might be able to shatter the curse, but the ritual would likely kill her. Tears streamed down her face as she began preparing herself. The ancient healing texts she'd studied, the rituals her mentor had taught her, everything pointed to this moment. A sacred mate could redirect magical energy, but doing so would require giving up her own life force. Her hands began to glow with moonlight, even though it was the dark of the eclipse. The light seemed to push back against the darkness, creating a luminescent barrier around her. The warrior and Kai both realized what she was about to do. Their eyes, one filled with betrayal, one with desperate love, locked onto her, understanding and horror dawning simultaneously. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I have to save everyone." The severance ritual began, her power exploding outward in a protective shield that forced everyone back. The dark curse tendrils recoiled from her light, shrieking a soundless protest. Both males began to cry out in agony as their bonds to her started to tear. The moment Arya began the severance ritual, raw magical energy erupted like a supernova. Every wolf in the fortress, from the royal guards to the rebel attackers, collapsed to their knees, overwhelmed by the sheer intensity of power being released. The mate bonds, one with the warrior, tender and unfulfilled, and the other with Kai, deep and newly awakened, began to tear. The energy felt like liquid fire, burning through her veins and radiating outward in concentric waves of pure, primal magic. As the bonds fractured, the curse sensed its potential destruction. It was not a passive entity but a sentient darkness that fought back with cunning and malevolence. Suddenly, Arya was bombarded with vivid mental projections, alternate futures where she could rule. These visions showed her as a dominant, feared leader. In one, she stood atop a throne of bones, her eyes silver and cold, commanding wolves who trembled before her absolute power. Another vision depicted her crushing rebellions with brutal efficiency, her healing abilities twisted into weapons of control and submission. The curse whispered seductively, "You could have everything, absolute power. No one would ever hurt you again." For a breathless moment, the temptation was real. She could see how easily she could transform her gentle healer's nature into something sharp and uncompromising. The power coursing through her veins felt intoxicating, promising protection through dominance. But Arya's core remained unchanged. Her healer's heart, compassionate, nurturing, committed to healing rather than hurting, rejected the curse's manipulations completely. Instead of fear, she channeled love. Love for her original pack. Love for Kai and the royal court. Love for the warrior who had fought so passionately. Love for every werewolf caught in centuries of manufactured conflict. Her power shifted. No longer was it a destructive force, but a regenerative wave of pure healing energy. She wasn't attacking the curse. She was mending the fundamental fractures that had allowed it to exist. Centuries of mistrust, generations of pain, ancient betrayals. She saw them all and chose to heal rather than punish. The curse shrieked, an otherworldly sound that wasn't quite sound, more a vibration, of pure malevolent intention. Its dark tendrils writhed and fought against her overwhelming compassion. But Arya's love was stronger. When the severance completed, the resulting magical explosion resembled thunder, a deafening crack that seemed to split reality itself. The curse fragmented into a million pieces, its destruction rippling across every werewolf territory like a healing wave. Arya's body, however, paid the ultimate price. The energy consuming her felt like internal flames, burning her from the inside out. Her vision blurred, her muscles began to fail, and she knew her life force was rapidly depleting. As she started to fall, two sets of arms simultaneously reached for her. The warrior and Kai, moments ago locked in mortal combat, now moved in perfect synchronization. Their previous rivalry evaporated, replaced by a shared terror of losing her. Their hands touched her simultaneously, one grasping her shoulders, the other supporting her collapsing form. Their only thought to prevent her fall, to somehow save her after she had just saved everyone. The first sensation Arya experienced was warmth, a gentle, persistent warmth that seemed to pulse with healing energy. Her body felt heavy, as if wrapped in layers of soft blankets, and the distant murmur of voices created a soothing background rhythm. When she finally opened her eyes, the light was soft, filtered through gauzy curtains. The healing chambers of the royal fortress looked different, no longer cold and sterile, but filled with an unexpected warmth. Medicinal herbs hung from the rafters, and sunlight streamed through open windows. Her vision gradually focused. To her left sat a royal healer, an older woman with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes. To her right, surprisingly, was a healer from her home pack. The two once bitter rivals now sitting side by side, their chairs nearly touching. "Welcome back," the royal healer said softly, offering her a cup of herbal tea. "You've been unconscious for 9 days." The pack healer, her childhood mentor, adjusted Arya's blankets. "We weren't sure you would wake," she admitted, her voice thick with emotion. "What you did, it was beyond anything we've ever seen." Arya tried to speak, but her throat was dry. The royal healer helped her take small sips of the tea, which tasted of moonflower and healing herbs. With each swallow, she felt strength returning to her body. As her awareness expanded, she noticed something fundamental had changed. The tension that had always existed between royal and pack wolves was gone. Where there would have once been rigid separation, now she saw cooperation. Royal guards worked alongside pack warriors, sharing meals and cleaning stations. Healers from different territories consulted each other openly. The curse's divisive magic had truly been destroyed. When Kai entered the room, he moved differently. Gone was the rigid, untouchable king. Now he walked with a vulnerability that spoke of profound transformation. Behind him stood the warrior from her original pack, not as an enemy, but as an unexpected ally. "You've changed everything," Kai said, his voice soft. He pulled a chair close to her bed, no longer maintaining the strict distance of a monarch. The warrior stood nearby, watching her with a mixture of respect and lingering affection. Over the next hour, they explained how her actions had reshaped werewolf society. The curse's destruction had revealed how manufactured their previous conflicts had been. Packs that had been enemies for generations were now seeking understanding. "I'm calling a grand council," Kai explained, "equal representation from every pack. No more absolute monarchy, no more hidden agendas." The warrior nodded, adding, "Your pack wishes to formally apologize for their actions during the eclipse." Arya listened, processing the magnitude of what had occurred. Her sacrifice hadn't just broken a magical curse, it had dismantled generations of systemic division. When her original pack's representatives arrived, led by her childhood beta friend, the room filled with a complicated emotional energy. They approached her bed with heads bowed, a gesture of profound humility. "We were wrong," her friend said, tears in her eyes. "We let fear override love. We doubted you when we should have trusted you." Arya's response surprised everyone. Instead of anger or recrimination, she simply smiled. "Fear is natural," she said, her voice still slightly raspy. "Understanding is the real challenge." Her forgiveness was immediate and complete, a healing balm that seemed to wash away the last remnants of the curse's divisive magic. As the day progressed, more visitors came. Healers, warriors, pack leaders, all wanting to see the woman who had fundamentally transformed their world. Each brought stories of miraculous changes happening across werewolf territories. Bonds were being rebuilt. Old wounds were being acknowledged and healed. The artificial barriers that had separated wolves for generations were crumbling. And at the center of it all was Arya, the healer who had chosen love over power, compassion over vengeance. The sacred guardian sanctuary emerged like a beacon of hope in the mountains, a place where neutral ground meant more than just geographical separation. Located precisely between three major werewolf territories, the compound rose from a verdant valley, its stone buildings blending seamlessly with the natural landscape. Arya moved with purpose, her healing abilities now recognized as something far beyond traditional pack medicine. Young wolves from rival packs trained together under her guidance, learning not just healing techniques but the deeper art of understanding and connection. The compound's design reflected her vision. Open courtyards where wolves could practice healing arts stood alongside meditation spaces. Training rooms featured mixed groups. Royal wolves training alongside rogues. Traditional pack healers working with independent practitioners. Each area symbolized the unity she had fought so hard to create. During morning training sessions, Arya moved between groups, her touch both gentle and authoritative. She understood that healing wasn't just about physical wounds, but about mending the psychological fractures that had divided werewolf society for generations. "Healing begins with understanding," she would tell her students, "not just of wounds, but of each other's experiences." Kai visited regularly, but their relationship had transformed completely. No longer bound by the mystical mate bond, they had developed a profound friendship based on mutual respect and shared vision. He would arrive with diplomatic updates, discussing potential collaborations between territories, always seeking her counsel. The warrior, who had once been so singularly focused on claiming her as a mate, now served as the sanctuary's primary protector. His role had evolved from potential mate to trusted guardian, his skills ensuring the safety of every wolf who sought training or healing. One quiet evening, as twilight painted the mountain slopes in soft blues and purples, the warrior approached Arya during her evening meditation. The sanctuary's students had retired, and a peaceful silence enveloped the compound. He sat beside her, his presence familiar, yet subtly different. Gone was the desperate energy of their previous interactions. Now, there was a calm deliberateness to his movements. "I wanted to speak with you," he said, his voice low and steady, "about my feelings, about us." Arya remained still, her breathing measured. She understood the weight of this conversation, how different it was from their past interactions, clouded by mystical mate bonds and pack expectations. The warrior continued, each word carefully chosen. "I love you," he said, "not because some mystical bond dictates it, not because of destiny or pack law, but because I choose to." His honesty hung in the air between them, pure and unencumbered by supernatural compulsion. Arya felt something shift, a recognition of genuine emotion stripped of all previous magical influences. She turned to face him, seeing him perhaps more clearly than she ever had before. The warrior who had once been so consumed by the idea of claiming her was now simply a person, complex, vulnerable, making a choice born of genuine emotion. The sanctuary bustled with energy as wolves from across territories gathered for the annual Unity Festival. Arya moved through the crowd, her presence both calming and authoritative. 6 months had transformed her from a contested sacred mate to a respected mediator and healer who bridged ancient divides. Young wolves from different packs trained together, their interactions a testament to the healing she had brought to werewolf society. Where once territorial lines were rigid and unbreakable, now cooperation flourished. Rogues trained alongside royal. Pack members and former enemies shared meals and knowledge. When Kai arrived, the atmosphere shifted subtly. No longer the intense, possessive king who had claimed her, he moved with a relaxed confidence that spoke of personal growth. His royal guard maintained a respectful distance, allowing him to approach Arya freely. "You've created something remarkable," Kai said, watching the mixed groups of wolves training in the courtyard. His eyes tracked a group of young healers practicing advanced healing techniques, their diverse pack markings a vibrant symbol of unity. Arya smiled, a genuine warmth spreading across her features. It wasn't just me, everyone chose to change. As they walked together, their conversation flowed with the easy comfort of true friendship. Gone were the charged tensions of their past, the mystical mate bond that had once threatened to consume them now replaced by mutual respect and genuine connection. "I have news," Kai said, a hint of excitement in his voice. "I've found my true mate among the northern mountain packs." Arya stopped, turning to face him. Her reaction was immediate and genuine, pure happiness for her friend. "Tell me everything," she urged, her eyes sparkling with genuine joy. Kai described a wolf from a remote northern territory, a strategist who challenged him intellectually, who saw him as a person rather than just a crown. Their connection had grown slowly, naturally, without the artificial pressure of mystical bonds. The warrior watched their interaction from a distance, his own feelings a complex mixture of respect and deep, abiding love. He had transformed too, no longer the aggressive alpha seeking to claim, but a partner who understood the true meaning of choice. As evening approached and the full moon began to rise, echoing the night of the original choosing ceremony, a sense of anticipation settled over the sanctuary. Wolves gathered for the Unity Festival's evening celebrations, their interactions a beautiful tapestry of cooperation and mutual understanding. The warrior approached Arya as moonlight spilled across the courtyard. Around them, wolves celebrated, dancing, sharing stories, showing the profound changes that had occurred since the curse's destruction. "Arya," he said, his voice steady and clear, "I want to ask you something." His approach was different from anything in their shared history. No mystical compulsion, no pack expectations. Just a man making a choice, asking a woman he loved to consider him. The warrior's request hung in the moonlight, weighted with vulnerability. His voice, usually commanding, now carried a tender uncertainty. "I want us to bond, but not like before. Not through mystical destiny, but through pure choice." Arya studied him, seeing the man beneath the warrior, someone who had transformed as profoundly as she had. Their journey hadn't been simple. Torn between pack loyalty and personal desire, they'd both learned that true connection transcended magical bonds. "A small ceremony?" she suggested, imagining something intimate. He nodded. "Just us, no grand spectacle." But destiny, and their respective communities, had other plans. When word spread of their intended bonding, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Wolves from every territory began arriving, each pack determined to represent their connection to the woman who had saved werewolf kind. The royal court sent elaborate invitations. Pack leaders requested attendance. Even rogues who had once been their enemies wanted to witness this union. So much for small, the warrior chuckled when delegates started arriving weeks before the planned date. The king personally intervened, offering to officiate. "This isn't just your ceremony," he explained. "It's a symbol of everything we've rebuilt." Preparations transformed from an intimate gathering to a massive celebration. The sanctuary's grounds expanded to accommodate hundreds of wolves, decorations reflecting every pack's colors interwove, creating a stunning tapestry of unity. Arya's former beta friend, now a respected diplomat, approached her with tears in her eyes. "Who would have thought?" she said, embracing Arya. "From a simple healer to the woman who changed everything." The elderly sacred wolf who had first trained Arya arrived, her presence a living connection to ancient werewolf traditions. She watched Arya with profound pride, understanding how much the young healer had grown. On the ceremony day, wolves from every territory gathered. Royal guards stood alongside pack warriors. Former rivals now stood shoulder to shoulder, their previous conflict seeming distant and insignificant. When Arya walked out, something extraordinary happened. Her healing powers, always mysterious, always evolving, manifested in a breathtaking display. As she moved, a soft luminescence surrounded her, touching every mated pair present. Bonds between wolves subtly strengthened, relationships healing at an energetic level. The king, standing as officiant, spoke powerfully about choice over destiny. "For generations, we believed mystical bonds determined our paths," he proclaimed. "Today, we celebrate the power of individual choice, of love freely given." Wolves listened, transfixed. The warrior stood beside Arya, not claiming her, but standing as her equal partner. Their vows were simple, spoken from the heart. No ancient rituals, no mystical compulsions, just two individuals choosing each other, fully and completely. As they completed their bonding, the sanctuary erupted in celebration. Howls rose from hundreds of wolf throats, a sound of pure joy and unity. And as the full moon rose, they prepared for the traditional pack run, not as separate territories, but as one interconnected community. 1 year after the momentous bonding ceremony, Arya stood in the sanctuary's garden, her hands resting gently on her slightly rounded belly. The soft afternoon light filtered through the trees, casting a warm glow on the training grounds where young wolves practiced their healing and combat skills. Nearby, her warrior mate supervised a group of guards, his commanding presence tempered by the gentle way he corrected and encouraged the younger wolves. Their connection had grown deeper with each passing month, a love built on mutual respect and genuine choice, rather than mystical compulsion. The sanctuary had become more than just a training ground. It was a symbol of hope for all werewolf kind. Wolves from different packs lived and trained together, breaking down the barriers that had divided them for generations. Young healers learned not just medical skills, but the art of understanding, of healing both body and spirit. A familiar scent caught Arya's attention before she saw them. The king approached, accompanied by his new queen and their infant heir. The change in him was remarkable. Where once he had been all sharp edges and rigid command, now he moved with a softness that spoke of true love and newfound peace. "Arya," he greeted her, his voice warm. The queen smiled, cradling their young son. "Would you bless him?" she asked, extending the child toward Arya. Arya's healing abilities had become legendary. Not just a physical healer, she now understood the deeper magic of connection, of mending not just wounds, but the invisible tears between hearts and spirits. As she touched the infant, a soft glow emanated from her hands. The child cooed, reaching up to grasp her finger. The king watched, a vulnerability in his eyes that would have been unimaginable a year ago. "He's strong," Arya murmured, feeling the child's potential. "And protected." The warrior joined them, his hand finding the small of Arya's back, a gesture of support and love. The king noticed her pregnancy, a smile softening his typically serious expression. "Another guardian for our people," he said, a hint of his old formality mixing with genuine warmth. As the afternoon light began to fade, Arya reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The path hadn't been smooth. It had been carved through pain, sacrifice, and the courage to challenge ancient traditions. The sanctuary bustled with activity. Young wolves trained in healing techniques developed from her unique abilities. Guard units practiced coordination, wolves from different packs working as seamless teams. The walls were adorned with symbols representing every pack, a visual testament to their newfound unity. That evening, as the full moon began to rise, wolves from every territory started arriving. What had begun as separate pack gatherings had transformed into a unified celebration. The sanctuary's grounds expanded to welcome hundreds of wolves, each arrival greeted with genuine warmth and respect. The warrior watched Arya with protective love, sensing the moment she would share their news. She stood at the center of the gathering, surrounded by the family she had chosen, not by blood or a mystical bond, but through genuine connection. As howls of joy began to rise with the moon, Arya prepared to announce their coming child, a symbol of the new world they were creating, where destiny was a suggestion, not a command. Her hand rested on her belly, her warrior's arms encircling her as she looked up at the moon, a silent thank you to the journey that had brought them here, to this moment of pure, chosen love.